Today, guys, what we're going to be doing is watching a video by Official Black Rain 79, which is a guy I watch at least sometimes, and we're going to be kind of learning his tips for blitz poker or zoom poker, or basically anytime that you fast fold poker style where you fold and you move on, and basically see what kind of tips he has for us. So
fast fold poker, just like zooms. So all the tips on this list are going to work for any type of fast fold poker.
Let's see what we got.
Now, the biggest,
I got to tell you guys, I have been struggling so much with being consistent, man. It's so hard. But we are developing a strategy, so we'll see what happens.
Poker and normal poker is that you're moved to a new table each hand, kind of like a tournament almost, and therefore it is hard to get reads on players as quickly. And so a lot of the tips on this list are going to exploit that fact. Those are some of the biggest strategy differences that I make, that I suggest to my students who play fast fold poker. But overall, I want to be clear that fast fold poker is still fairly similar to any poker game that you've played before, so we don't need a world-changing strategy here. We just need to make a few slight adjustments, which we're going to get into right now. So tip number one to beat Zoom poker games is going to be 3-bet more pre-flop.
True. Honestly, where I struggle is not pre-flop, but post-flop is where I struggle. But 3-betting, I'm telling you, 100% of the time, most of the time they're going to call. You should only be 3-betting if you really do have really solid hands, 6s, 7s, 8s, 9s, 10s, all the way up, like queen jack, maybe queen 9 up, king queen offsuit up.
All right, so what do I mean by 3-betting more pre-flop? Well, 3-betting is the
means they raise, you raise
pre-flop.
So the blind is bet one, the big blind one, bet two is a raise, and bet three is re-raising a raise.
Is that you get moved to a new table after every single hand, and there's often hundreds of players in the entire player pool in a Zoom poker game, especially if you play low stakes, and therefore it is very difficult to get reads on players. So what do we want to be doing in an environment like this? We want to be bluffing more early on, especially before players get reads on us. So one of the best ways to do this is to take some speculative hands, such as suited aces, for example, like ace 3 of diamonds. These are an excellent hand to make a re-raise semi-bluff with
suited,
pre-flop, because these hands have tremendous card removal, meaning that the ace blocks other aces, meaning that it's less likely that they have an ace in their hands. And also these hands, even if we get called, we have an excellent backdoor strategy, because these hands typically have around 33% equity versus a big pair like pocket kings or pocket queens. They can also make the nut flush, top pair, you get the idea. But the bottom line is, when we re-raise pre-flop, we're looking to take the pot down, and we're going to take it down the majority.
If you're gonna re-raise with a 3-bet, you need to re-raise a bit heavier though. Like you can't 3-bet, so if they bet 20 cents, you can't raise 40 cents and take down a pot. It's not gonna work that way. Really, I found that you have to be closer towards that dollar mark, at the dollar mark, if not a little bit higher. But
because our opponent at Zoom poker doesn't know anything about us. And what do players do when they don't know anything about you? You've probably heard it before. I'll lay it down and I'll wait for a better spot. So I hope you guys are following me here. This is going to be a theme on many of the tips in this list, is we take advantage of what I call the information gap early on when players don't know anything about us, and we take advantage of this by making some more light bluffs. Now we're doing it with hands that have some value. Once again, I'm not going to do this with 10-5 offsuit or some nonsense like that, right? So it's important to pick your spots, but this is an excellent strategy to get ahead in Zoom poker games, especially before anybody has a read on you. All right, so tip number 2 for Zoom poker games can be building off this same theme, which is to run more big bluffs after the flop. Now, once again, you want to be making sure that you're doing this in the right situations.
Yeah.
I made a couple videos.
This is where things get really tricky. Bluffing post-flop, meaning after the 3 cards come out, you make a bluff. So say the 3 cards come out, king, 7, 9, and it doesn't really matter the suit. Say we're just not suited up well. Most of the time, time somebody's gonna have a high card, so a king, queens, aces, anything like that comes out, you got to be pretty careful. So we'll see what he says, but I don't know. Like, you can bluff a little bit. Again, you get close to that dollar. If they raise over $1, it's pretty much like, I'd say GG's for you.
Talking about running big bluffs, I walked you through some example hands step by step. I'll actually link those in the description below. And if you watch those videos, you'll know that I specifically talk about how a successful bluff in poker requires that you're telling a believable story. Specifically that the board run out, the flop, turn, and river fits your perceived range, depending on what strategy.
Again, yeah, that's the thing. If you have a bluff, you have to kind of make up in your mind before you bluff. What is the hand that you're going to have, and how are you going to bluff that hand? How would you play that hand if you normally had it? So again, big bluffs, you know, it's tricky.
Pre-flop is the pre-flop caller or raiser. I'm not going to get deep into that in this video. Like I said, I've made videos already on that. But the bottom line is, once again, we're exploiting this idea in Zoom poker games that they don't know anything about us yet, so we can take advantage of this. Once again, players are much more likely to give you credit early on when they don't know much about you. If you run 5 bluffs against them in a row, they're going to start looking you up. But the first couple you can often get away with, and that is why my top 2 biggest strategies for Zoom poker are to just start bluffing more, especially early on. But once again, make sure your bluffs make sense. Make sure you're doing it with hands that give you outs. You know, don't run stone cold bluffs with bad hands. Always give yourself a chance to, you know, hit some
facts. That's like the most important thing. If you're going to bluff, again, like, you need to bluff with like good high cards that should, you know, have perceived value before the flop. Like king, queen, and the flop is 3, 4, 4, right? You can bluff a little bit there, or just kind of check. And I don't know if you would bluff that, because if you're bluffing that, then it could be tricky. So
lucky card on the river, for example, even if you get called. So tip number 3 for Zoom poker games is going to be to use a HUD. Now, I've been a big proponent of using a HUD for many years now. These are the numbers you can get on your screen that gives you data on the players you're playing against. This is extremely helpful in online poker for getting better reads. This also helps us study our game and
I need to see about a poker HUD. Again, it basically tells you, like, you know, like how often they're playing hands, stuff like that.
I use a program called Poker Tracker. I'll have links to it.
It costs money though. I gotta try and get
why is using a HUD so important in Zoom? Well, once again, you're often playing against hundreds of other players, especially if you play low stakes. It's just going to be impossible to keep good reads on all of these players. And so why would you not use a HUD and let it do the work for you? It's going to help tremendously when you're in a hand versus somebody else. Maybe they're trying to run a bluff against you, like I just talked about, and you'll have the data on your screen to know what kind of player type you're up against. So if possible, I would suggest trying a HUD at least, if it's allowed on the site that you play on, because I think it helps tremendously with fast fold poker games. All right, guys, so tip number 4 for Zoom poker games is going to be to master a basic, tight, and aggressive strategy. Now, the idea with Zoom poker games is you are playing a ton of hands. Here. It's called fast fold poker for a reason, that you're going to get a ton of hands. The action is fast and furious because people can just keep hitting that fast fold button and boom, you're getting so many hands. So you need to have a solid bread and butter, tight and aggressive strategy like I teach in my free poker cheat sheet, which will be the top link in the description below.
Always plug in.
Basically, that involves being highly selective with the hands that you choose to play, paying close attention to your position at the poker table, specifically playing most of your hands around the button and the cutoff, which are the statistically proven most profitable seats at the poker table by far, and then
so always the button. So again, if you're playing big blind, small blind, button meaning that you don't have to pay, then you have the cutoff. Really, I think that these 3 seats are probably the best here, but then you have the under the gun. I don't know what EP stands for, and under the gun +1 or the, normally this is called hijack. So I don't know, but basically, you know, really bad, because if you just call the big blind, he's gonna have to play hands that he doesn't want to play. So
and following that up with an aggressive strategy on the flop, turn, and river as well, depending on the board run out, but keeping your foot on the gas pedal, leaning on them, putting pressure on them in key spots. Once again, I've already put together a free poker cheat sheet. It's around 50 pages long, and it walks you step by step through a basic, tight, and aggressive strategy. I would highly recommend studying that, reading it. It's totally free. It'll be the top link in the description below. All right, so my final tip for Zoom poker games, tip number 5, is to develop strong tilt control. So guys, like
that means basically just don't get angry. So I think some of the stuff was good. I wish you would have talked a little bit more about post flop, because I feel like post flop is kind of the more important stuff. But if you found this video helpful, be sure to drop a like, hit that subscribe button, and I'll see you guys again very soon.